Hi, Kevin Wright here again, and it's time for another of my property finance tips. What are we going to be talking about this week? Well, we're going to be looking at an inquiry I had recently. Young fella, early 20s, inconsistent work record, some periods of unemployment, doesn't own any property right now, but wants to buy their first property to be a buy-to-let property and not a main residence. So how do they go about financing that? If that sounds like something you're interested in, watch the full video with me. So this week we're looking at a young person, early 20s, inconsistent work record, time they've been unemployed. They don't own a property right now. Their first property, they don't want to live in it, they want to rent it out, want to still keep living where they are now, maybe living at home with parents still, or in relatively cheap rented accommodation. So what problems would that create for people? And this particular one more thing, in the next 6 months they want to quit working and go travelling. What does that do to their chances of getting a mortgage? There's one key word here that covers how mortgage lenders would treat this, and that is intent. So what is your intent at the outset of the mortgage, and have you disclosed that intent fully to the lender, so that the lender can make a fair and accurate judgment on whether they want to lend to you or not? Because if you leave bits out because you think the lender won't like it, then that really amounts to getting a mortgage by deception. Getting a mortgage by deception, you could say, is the thin end of the wedge in terms of mortgage fraud. Let's look at some of the issues here. Young person, now buy-to-let lenders have minimum ages, and they differ. Like most lenders, they don't have uniform criteria. They're different. They differ lender to lender. Some lenders have a minimum age of 25, others 21. If you are in your early 20s or even in your late teens, you may find there's some restriction to you having the full range of mortgage lenders. But a good broker should be able to find you one. If it's purely an age criteria, that doesn't need to be an insurmountable barrier. In terms of employment, well, if you're not working or you've got a history of gaps in work, that's going to reduce the amount of lenders that they're prepared to take you on, because buy-to-let lenders really, they want to be have the comfort of knowing that if you have a month or two where you can't get a tenant, one leaves, takes you a few weeks to get the next one in, so you're going to have a gap in the rental income coming in. They want you to know that you've got enough money over and above your living costs to keep paying the mortgage. Because what they don't want you to do is to be ringing up and saying, sorry, I can't pay the mortgage this month, I haven't got any rent money. So they look for people with a decent level of income so that they've got enough slack there to pick it up. The threshold typically for this with a lot of lenders is £25,000 per year. Now, that's single income if it's a single application, joint income if it's a joint application. If you haven't got that on a permanent contract, then you reduce the number of lenders that you've got to choose from to lend. With this particular chap, and he's been unemployed and he's now got contract work, but he's only 3 months into the contract work, so that's going to add as a damper. The other thing is that most mortgage lenders, buy-to-let mortgage lenders, won't lend. They don't lend to first-time buyers because they expect first-time buyers, in the normal scheme of things, to buy a property to live in, not to rent out as their first property. And because the buy-to-let lending criteria is more relaxed than main residence lending criteria. And large number of buy-to-let lenders see that it's just a backdoor way of people getting a property they couldn't afford the mortgage for on their own income. A lot of buy-to-let lenders, to save wasting or eating up underwriters' time, drilling down to see whether this is a genuine application or a main residence application masquerading as a buy-to-let application, they just say we don't lend. Saves a lot of time and stops their underwriters getting bogged down in certain cases. Now there are a few, very few lenders actually that will do first-time buyer buy-to-lets, and they typically would look at your personal income, not the property's rental income, so that you're not gaining some advantage and getting a bigger mortgage on a buy-to-let basis than you would be able to get on a main residence basis. So there's a few lenders there, so it's still an option, but again, you haven't got a very wide choice of lenders. Now let's pick up the travelling bit, because that's interesting. So this particular fella wants to go travelling in a few months' time. Now if that's disclosed to a mortgage lender, it's going to have a bearing on whether they decide to lend. If they're a mortgage lender that says we want you to earn $25,000 a year, for example, within a matter of months you're not going to be. It's very important that this type of thing is disclosed to mortgage lenders. It gives them the opportunity to make an accurate decision on whether they should be lending or not. And again, if you think, oh well, they might not like that, I'll just keep that quiet, I just won't tell them about my intention to go travelling, you're back into sort of deception again, really, aren't you? So the key thing with mortgage lenders is to be transparent and upfront, because then you'll get the mortgage you're entitled to, and there'll be no deception and no underhand stuff going on there. So if you're young, that's not a barrier to getting the buy-to-let mortgage necessarily. If you're in intermittent employment, that's not a complete no-go either. But if you're going to go travelling, then that could be pretty much an issue. Okay, so there we are. So that's giving you some guidance on this week's property tip. If you've liked that, hey, why not share it? If you know other people that would benefit from these regular property tips, pass it on to them, get them looking at these videos as well. Subscribe if you haven't already subscribed, get people you know to subscribe, and any comments, put them down here and I'll attend to them. Thanks very much for watching this, and I'll see you next week.